60 Minutes is proudly brought to you by the radically new Holden Commodore, giving you the driving edge.
Tonight on 60 Minutes.
If there was one man who was almost to be Peter Williams's undoing, it was the head of the notorious Mr. Asia drug syndicate, Terry Clark.
At that stage, the name Terry Clark meant nothing to me. It was just another case to be done. And little did I know how much it was to affect my life. Oh, there's no doubt there was an attempt made by the police to set me up. The police were trying to say that I was part of some sort of criminal conspiracy, and my part was to sort of give comfort to couriers, and I was to meet them at airports and things like that.
About twice a week, usually before school, he snaps, and his temper tantrums send the home into turmoil.
Tomorrow we've got something pretty exciting for us to do. Your mother and I have enrolled and been accepted to do a course called the Triple P program.
The Positive Parenting program will take 12 weeks of hard work. Joshua Lawrence is another boy who's good when he's good and awful when he's bad.
You must be Josh. Hi, I'm Liz. How are you?
He's 2.5, and when things aren't going Joshua's way, he hits, bites, scratches, and headbutts.
Vautier's remarkable evidence was documented here in the pristine killing fields of the Antarctic during a 5-month voyage with the Japanese whaling fleet.
They produced these wires that looked like something out of a Victorian horror book or horror story. They were actually going to electrocute a live animal.
This is what the Japanese whaling authorities did not want the world to see. I'm Cameron Bennett.
I'm John Hudson.
I'm Janet McIntyre.
I'm Mike Valentine.
And I'm Janet Wilson. Those stories and your letters tonight on 60 Minutes. The combination of greed and self-interest have taken a toll on the legal profession. Its reputation has been tarnished by trust fund scams, travelling allowance rorts and sometimes shady practice. In the midst of all this, Peter Williams has stood out like a beacon, a fearless advocate of free speech and a champion of the underdog. The name Peter Williams QC is more likely to be attached to a seemingly hopeless cause, fighting against the odds in desperate cases. Just what motivates and drives Peter Williams is the subject of his new book, Passions That Still Run Strongly.
I have a real hatred, a detestation for injustice, and particularly malpractice, and particularly arrogance, and particularly tunnel vision and unfairness.
Peter Williams, this country's top criminal barrister.
There are policemen who become obsessed with cases, who have what I call tunnel vision. And they really believe someone is guilty. And because they've got this obsession, they will not take into account any piece of evidence that leads in a different direction. They find something that's inconsistent with the guilt of that person, they either ignore it or indeed even conceal it.
And he says he has the proof to back it up.
And you've got to remember this, that with great immodesty, I've been in the profession a long, long time. I've conducted many, many cases. And now there's nothing really that I want. I am a silk. I don't want to be a judge. No one has any inducement so far as I'm concerned, and I feel I'm in a rather unique position to actually tell the truth as I see it.
And the truth, according to Williams, includes some blatant attempts by police to set up his clients. There's the case of Simon Dodds, found guilty of owning 38 fertiliser sacks of cannabis. The bags of dope had been found under an old disused freezing works on land Dodds leased. The farmer was sentenced to 6 years imprisonment. Peter Williams appealed and secured a second trial. Part of the prosecution case, 3 cannabis reefers found in Dodds' car.
When the reefers, and they'd been through the DSIR and they'd had the active ingredient of cannabis extract. We shouldn't have won the Dodds case, but sometimes you can win a case you shouldn't win. because the expose of the misconduct is such that the jury are so disgruntled by it that they express their feelings by a verdict of not guilty. And case after case is one like that.
Williams has been set up himself, a set-up witnessed by his then law clerk, Mick Brown. It happened in the late 60s. Williams, the rising star of the criminal bench, had ruffled a few police feathers.
And this fellow came from somewhere, this Burke Kennedy fellow, I don't know where, and he started to harass me and push me and jostle me and yell at me and go on and so forth, obviously trying to provoke me.
Retreating into a nearby building, his assailant started punching.
So I gave him a little clip, and he went flying over here and landed somewhere around here.
Where did you clip him?
Well, it was a lucky one. I think I got him on the chin, I think.
So it was a good... You saw this, Mick.
Peter was sort of, you know, keep away, you know, get away, and perhaps even stronger than that. But it was... He really was deliberately attempting to set up some sort of thing. And Peter dealt with the matter summarily, as we say, and very effectively.
So what was the upshot of all of this, Peter?
Well, the upshot of it was that there were police just around the corner here, obviously waiting for things to happen, and I was immediately arrested and taken to the police station and put through all the business of fingerprints and all the rest of it, and charged with assault and fighting and all sorts of charges. And then, of course, the next day I had to appear in the court, and I can remember the magistrate saying, "Was it a hard punch, Mr. Brown? Was it a heavy punch that Williams administered to this person?" And Mick was silent for a moment, as if reflecting, and then he said, with his beautiful sort of way he talks, "It was a beauty, Your Honour." And then a smile came across the magistrate's face. And I felt a lot, you know, more confident.
He's got a deeply ingrained sense of what he sees as justice in the law, and the courage to enunciate those views.
Mick Brown became a judge. He believes Peter Williams is New Zealand's best criminal barrister.
Peter was a fearless advocate, and you have to have that. I mean, that's one of the good things about the law, when people stand up, and often it was taking cases against the establishment, and that requires courage, and in those days it certainly required courage, and he does have an integrity, a wonderful integrity.
There are those within the legal profession who see criminal lawyers as not much more than criminals themselves.
Well, I mean, that's a danger which you have to avoid.
Peter's there for the white-hot passion. He's not there for the tedious, terrible, flunky work.
Former Prime Minister David Lange is another Peter Williams watcher.
The champion of causes which appear to be quite bizarre and grotesque and sometimes muddle-headed, but always with a passion. He is the sort of romantic philosopher that sees the best in people even though there's danger signs all over them.
And Williams has dealt with the most dangerous. In 1963, he was counsel in the Bassett Road machine gun murder trial, one of the country's most sensational criminal trials. Ronald John Jorgensen and co-accused John Frederick Gillies were charged with the murder of two men in a beer house feud. Williams says the case included another example of police mischief.
I heard later, for instance, that one of the policemen at night time went out and fired shots outside the house where a prosecution witness lived. So next day there could be headlines in the Herald, "Shots fired outside prosecution witness." And then, of course, one of the witnesses, before he gave evidence, was taken by the police out to Titirangi and given a thrashing. But brutality, police brutality in those days of a physical nature was relatively common.
While Williams doesn't claim Jorgensen was innocent, he says there was another side to the man.
I saw in that man an artistic and highly compassionate side. There was a dichotomy there. There was the man, the criminal, the brute, the brutal side. But there was also the other side, the artistic side, the sensitive side. A man who could write short stories for children. A man who learned Braille so he could interpret books for the blind. A man who was gifted as a painter. This is a painting that was done for me many, many years ago by Ron Jorgensen. Of course, it's been done by him in prison on mail bag canvas, probably using mainly house paints. It's done from memory. It's not done from a photograph. And you can see, you can see the date of it by the old sideburns and that sort of stuff.
It's a good likeness.
Yeah, I think it sort of makes me look like an angel.
Just slightly, just slightly. And this is something else that he's done up here.
That's done an interior of prison. It shows the absolute despair, and it shows the absolute sort of nihilism of desperate sort of nothingness of prisons, the gloom, the despair, and the solitariness and the loneliness. He's captured it extremely well, hasn't he?
Now, there's another artist over here. Who is this painter here?
Well, here's another one here. That's painted about a month before his decease, and that's Clark, Sinclair Clark, the notorious...
Terry Clark.
Terry Clark.
If there was one man who was almost to be Peter Williams's undoing, it was the head of the notorious Mr. Asia drug syndicate, Terry Clark, also known as Alexander Sinclair. In 1975, Clark was charged with importing heroin. He hired Williams to defend him.
At that stage, the name Terry Clark meant nothing to me. It was just another case to be done. Little did I know how much it was to affect my life.
Clark was granted bail and promptly fled New Zealand. A short time later, strange things started happening to his lawyer.
Oh, there's no doubt there was an attempt made by the police to set me up. The police were trying to say that I was part of some sort of criminal conspiracy, and my part was to sort of give comfort to couriers, and I was to meet them at airports and things like that. And I received these phone calls from people who were saying that they were hostesses at the airport, and they weren't hostesses at all. They were, of course, police officers. And they were saying there was a girl out there hysterical and absolutely out of her mind, and I was to come to the airport urgently and that sort of thing. And I got a series of calls like that. I later found out, of course, that this was a sort of a plan to try to get me to go to the airport.
Clark was on the run for 2 years, operating his drug ring from Australia. He was rearrested in Brisbane and sent back to New Zealand to face trial.
Yes, well, of course, you see, we won the case. If we hadn't won the case for Terry Clark, this thing would never have happened, but we won the case.
This thing he's talking about is the impugning of the one thing every lawyer needs, a good reputation. In 1982, an Australian Royal Commission, conducted by Mr. Justice Stewart, came to Auckland as part of its investigation into the Mr. Asia syndicate. When its findings were published, the Stewart Royal Commission named Peter Williams as accepting rewards without regards to proper professional standards. The Law Society decided to investigate whether he'd breached their ethical standards.
At the investigation stage, it will be necessary for the Auckland District Law Society, and they've agreed to do this.
Bruce Slane, then Secretary of the Law Society.
They will need to gather evidence because they will have to be able to prove any charges that they bring.
And of course I was cleared by the Law Society of the inquiry and that sort of thing, and later made a QC, which I think is recognition of integrity in itself. So, but on the other hand, the scars are there.
To get away during those turbulent years, Peter Williams took to the water, the blue water, sailing in fiercely fought races like the Sydney to Hobart and the Auckland to Tonga. You've always been a bit of a battler, really, haven't you? Is that why you like the sea? Because there's always a battle you can wage with the sea.
There is always a battle with the sea, and you've got to be, of course, as everybody knows, very conservative. The sea is something you must respect, because if you don't respect it, it'll beat you.
These days, Williams prefers to potter. Physically cautious, he's still idealistically volatile, never more so than when it comes to the issue of penal reform. This isn't any Don Quixote tilting at windmills. He speaks from grim experience. At 20 years old, he was arrested for driving his motorbike while under the influence of alcohol. Unbelievably, he was sentenced to 10 days in jail.
And I was just absolutely aghast. I had no realisation just what prisons were like. And I saw rife homosexuality, I saw bullying, I saw people who were feeble-minded being bullied. But at night time, locked in the cell there with the screams and yells and people calling out and so forth, it was a very, very vivid and very, very ghastly experience.
We would like to know the suicide rates. We would like to know how much the conditions
in these prisons.
The foundations had been laid for William's most passionate belief, creating prisons that educate, don't emasculate.
Prisons should be used really like hospitals in many ways to improve people's health.
At the moment, do you think prisons rehabilitate or do they entrench?
There have been tendencies in certain prisons, we can't generalise because there have been some good steps made in our prisons, but basically prisons still are breeding grounds for crime.
Williams says prisons need to be humanised.
The punishment of prison is to deprive people of their freedom. But having done that, it should not be cruel. It should not degenerate the person. It should not take dignity away from that person. The person should still be treated as a human being. And the system should, as well as it can, try and improve and elevate that person. If a person is illiterate, he or she should be taught to read and write. If a person has some sort of problem with anger or something like that, steps should be taken to abate those problems.
Williams says we should also follow the Dutch and allow sex in our prisons.
What is done in Holland, there are suites, a suite of rooms made available, and those rooms are made available for married couples, not just for sex, but also for intimacy, so that they're, particularly a person serving several years, he can maintain a proper, intimate relationship with his spouse. And I see nothing wrong in that.
At 63, Peter Williams is slowing down. These days, his court appearance is more likely to be with partner Janie Phillips at the Remuera Rackets Club. But the passion for justice, particularly social justice, still hits hard.
Society really has to be more responsible, because society's not all that great. There's so much hypocrisy. People think because they've got a brick and tile house in Remuera and a couple of kids in a private school that they really, they've hit the jackpot and they're so superior. But society itself, when you look at the world and you look at the misery and you look at the ecological disasters, the mess of the place, no one should ever be conceited. No one should ever be arrogant.
And Peter Williams' book, A Passion for Justice, will become available in all good bookstores from Monday, the 3rd of November. We've all heard the term little tearaway, often used endearingly to describe a child of active disposition. Sometimes, though, the tearaway is actually a terrorist, a child who literally wrecks homes with his tantrums and disruptive behaviour. Liz Hayes found a group of parents who, at their wits' end, turned to a positive parenting program for their own sanity. A warning to other parents, be prepared to experience some frustration in watching this story.
In this choir of little angels is a child who wrecks his house, injures the cat, lights fires in his bedroom, lies, swears and steals. That's him there, 9-year-old Matthew Jackson.
Perfect angel one day, an absolute mongrel. Well, I won't say anymore, but he's just, when he goes off, he's just, it just breaks your heart.
Matthew's parents, Jeanette and Chris, have tried everything. Paediatricians, psychiatrists, naturopaths, even allergy tests, a brain scan and medication.
Now Kate's beaten you, she's ready to go, and you're not. I am, you stupid bloody idiot!
About twice a week, usually before school, he snaps, and his temper tantrums send the home into turmoil.
You say, go and brush your teeth, and he won't. I've sort of begged with him and smacked him and tried all different ways of doing it, but nothing seems to work.
He just says, no, I will not. And then all the things like, you can't make me do that, and, that all comes out. And he's right, we can't. His whole face just goes red, and all his veins in his neck stick out, and his eyes bulge.
Ready to have a stroke.
And you think, oh, God, he's going to have a stroke or something.
And he's often said to me, Mummy, I don't know why I do it. Something inside makes me angry.
Tomorrow we've got something pretty exciting for us to do. Your mother and I have enrolled and been accepted to do a course called the Triple P program.
The Positive Parenting program will take 12 weeks of hard work. There'll be visits to a clinic and homework for all of them, including Matthew's 19-year-old brother, David, and his sister, Kate, 17.
The fact that Mum and I feel that this is probably our last shot, because we're not going to put up with all this fighting and trauma for the rest of our married lives, because we got married to be happy. Mum and I want to have, at this stage of our life, a happy time together without having to worry about whether you're going to burn our house down. But anyway, that's what it's all about, Matt, so we've got to... You listening?
Joshua Lawrence is another boy who's good when he's good and awful when he's bad.
You must be Josh. Hi, I'm Liz. How are you?
He's 2.5, and when things aren't going Joshua's way, he hits, bites, scratches, and headbutts. His mother, Gail, cops the worst of it.
I've had bite marks, continual bite marks, or, you know, he's hit other people, not just myself. And it's constantly in the face or around the head, and he'll use objects to hit you and that sort of stuff.
Gail's husband, Jono, a geologist, spends long periods away. He's currently on a 6-week stint to Indonesia. She's worried Joshua might harm her second baby, due early next year. So, like Matthew's parents, in desperation, they're coming here, to the University of Queensland School of Psychology. For session 1 of the Positive Parenting program, Gail is to play with Joshua, then let him play on his own. There are no problems until it comes time to put the toys away.
For children like Joshua, it's important that he learns that, you know, hitting and hurting and so on are behaviours that are not going to work.
That'll do. First lesson, says Dr. Matt Sanders, the clinical psychologist who developed Triple P, is don't give in. That simply rewards the child.
If he wants attention, which all children do, that there are other types of behaviour that he can do that will be even more effective in getting an audience and getting a reaction.
Dr. Sanders says Triple P is now being used in other states and achieving success rates with up to 95% of families. When the Jacksons come in, Matthew stays outside for a while as Chris and Jeanette pour out their concerns.
I found him one day in his room with a piece of string around his neck, tied into a knot, standing on his bed saying, "I'm going to jump."
Okay, now, what's the circumstance that leads up to that? Is it like, has he been in trouble, or has he been...
Usually when he's been in trouble or hasn't got his own way.
You were saying before that you sometimes feel really sad, you know. What do you feel like doing?
Burying myself.
Burying yourself?
A lot.
Do you mean like killing yourself?
No, not quite.
Not quite.
Suffocating myself.
Suffocating yourself, okay. Does losing your temper worry you? Is it a problem for you?
Yes.
It is, okay. Why is it a problem for you?
Because I can't control myself when I get too upset.
And it's not that anger is an emotion to be suppressed, but it's an emotion that children need to learn appropriate ways of expressing. And parents need to help children learn what those skills are.
Sorry, Matthew, that's mine. This is yours here. This is yours here.
For the first few weeks, there aren't too many changes. But after 6 years of this, the Jacksons weren't expecting miracles.
Matthew? Come on.
Ow! I'm coming, I'm coming!
Dr. Sanders has been confident from day one. because of the whole family's willingness to accept and adopt the techniques.
The idea is that if you're able to remain reasonably calm in the line of fire, which is not an easy thing to learn to do, frequently you will avoid inflaming the situation because children do not cope well with angry adults. Often it will set a disruptive child off even more.
How often does a child's behaviour change when the parent's behaviour changes?
Well, very frequently. Often we see change within the first couple of days, sometimes within the first couple of hours.
Time to go to sleep. You lie down.
Gail Lawrence has come home to practice what she's been taught. For a start, a new bedtime routine for Joshua.
Night-night.
In the past, he's been getting away with jumping into bed with his parents.
Lie down. Go to sleep.
But not anymore.
Did it take a while for him to understand what you were wanting to achieve?
For some things, some behaviours were easier than others to deal with. The sleeping was easier. I mean, I was surprised how quickly that settled. I mean, that was within 3 days. But yeah, but some things are taking a bit longer.
So we write down some ideas that will give us.
A big part of the course is resolving family disputes. Chris is a chef. He goes to work at dawn, and when he comes home, he's prone to doing his block, especially with Matthew.
Well, I think that you have a problem fighting in front of the children.
That I have a problem with fighting in front of the children, but you don't have a problem with it.
You're the cause of it.
It takes two to argue. We both do argue in front of them.
And Chris is annoyed that Jeanette, a full-time mum, sleeps in, leaving Matthew to run riot before school.
But I went to bed the other night, and it wasn't that late, and I didn't get up till 9 o'clock.
I know, but that's where you can't expect to get Matthew to school by 9:15 if you're not getting out of bed until 8:30.
Well, do you ever realise that I'm mentally stuffed sometimes, that I don't want to get out of bed?
I do realise it. I try to realise that, but...
Jeanette says nothing Matthew has done has worn her down more than an incident 2 years ago.
When she lost that, she just went to pieces.
Matthew stole and lost her engagement ring. She still can't get over it.
It was like losing oh no, it's only a ring, but it was just like losing one of your parents, you know, you sort of had it for 20 years and it was like...
So how did it actually make you feel to...
I wanted to kill him. I just basically didn't care what he did. I couldn't care less if he walked out on the road and got hit with a car. It wouldn't have worried me.
And what would you like to be able to change about Mum?
I'd like to get her engagement ring back.
What effect do you think it has had on Mum?
I've broken her heart.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good boy, we'll go to the park after.
No.
Yeah, you play with the toys. I won't take it away.
Come on. No!
Remember, keep your hands
No!
You'd never know it from this, but meanwhile, young Joshua Lawrence is progressing really well. He's staying in bed at night and learning new daytime rules too.
1 minute.
If he's good, Gail praises him. If he's naughty, he's sent to quiet time to cool off. It's an alternative to smacking, which can make things worse if a child is upset. If quiet time fails, the next step is time out. That means a few minutes alone in the next room. At home, Gail will use the laundry.
These ones? These ones? Oh.
Matthew Jackson, too, is becoming a different boy.
Yeah. Looks like he's got a fish finger on his...
During the program, he even received a Student of the Week award.
What makes you think you might get it?
So being so good.
Hey, put it here. Put it here. If you think back to how it was before with Mum and Dad, in what ways is it better now?
Mum gets up in the morning.
So does Mum seem a bit happier to you?
Yeah.
Oh, that's neat.
How do you manage to change, just in 3 months, a child like Matthew into the child he is today?
I think it's really important to realise just what a difference changes in parenting and changes in marital communication and supporting each other as partners can make to children's lives.
How much do you think Matthew's turnaround is a result of your change in parenting?
I think it's everything. Everything evolves around the fact that we're better parents.
I have actually said to Matthew, I really forgive you for what you did about my ring. And he said to me, Mummy, one of these days I'll get you another one.
Just giving him lots of cuddles and lots of compliments and, you know, all those sorts of things really helps.
You're my friend, aren't you?
Yeah.
Okay, quiet time. Thank you. You're asked not to do it. Not do as Daddy asked.
The Lawrence family has a new lease on life as well. With Jono away, progress was slower, but nonetheless effective. Before, a scene like this would have meant tears and tantrums.
Okay, Josh Posh, time's up's over. You can go out and play. It certainly has reduced a lot of tension in the house, and the communication's a heck of a lot better.
It's to strike a balance. You know, it's to get the balance there where you can actually have some life yourself, where you're not absorbed by a child.
So you're getting your own lives back now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yoshi, you're playing very well there.
Many parents say to us that they love their children, but they don't like them. And that many parents who go through this kind of process actually start to like their children again because their children are actually more likeable. There's still some very hard-nosed people who basically believe that if you give kids a good kick up the bum and a smack, that's going to solve all of the problems in the community. This is just such an error in judgment. If we can get into these problems before a child is a late primary school age child, you can really make a very significant difference to a child's life.
8 months ago, many of you were outraged when 60 Minutes showed pictures of whales being killed by electric shock. We also showed those pictures of Japan's so-called scientific whale cull to Kiwi experts who did their own experiments which proved that the process was barbaric, causing the whales to die an excruciating and lingering death. Well, this week New Zealand scored a partial success in the campaign against electric harpoons at the International Whaling Commission meeting in Monaco. The Japanese have agreed to phase out the technique over the next 3 years. New Zealand's Whaling Commission delegate says he would have preferred a full ban, but this agreement is the next best thing. Here then, Cameron Bennett's disturbing report, which first brought the electric killings to public attention.
This is what the Japanese whaling authorities did not want the world to see. What pictures specifically did they not want released?
Specifically the electrocutions. They came under the subtitle of unsightly practices or unsightly tasks.
Unsightly.
And also any bloodletting, but I kept the bloodletting on screen to a minimum. But the electrocutions, of course, couldn't be disguised.
For the first time, English filmmaker Mark Vautier has exposed the reality of just how the Japanese kill minke whales. Vautier's remarkable evidence was documented here in the pristine killing fields of the Antarctic during a 5-month voyage with the Japanese whaling fleet.
There's all this beauty, and at the same time, there's all this violence and ugliness, and I don't think anything could present that better than the pictures of the ice and the pictures of the whales being caught.
The Nishin Maru, the world's last whale factory ship, every November with fanfare and with ceremony, she sets a course for the Antarctic. The Japanese maintain, as always, the mission is scientific, about establishing the size of whale populations rather than harvesting whale meat. And on board is filmmaker Mark Vautier. He's an unwitting miscalculation on the part of the Japanese.
I think I was tremendously lucky in that the chap who was ultimately responsible for giving me permission to go hadn't actually been to the Antarctic himself to see the electrocutions. So clearly he wasn't in a position to anticipate what might happen.
Shipboard life aboard the Nishamaru reflects life at home. Strict discipline, rigid protocol, it has to be that way. The crew will live and work together for the next 5 months. And whale meat is on the menu 4 or 5 times a week. The whaling fleet commander is on his 35th consecutive trip.
Japanese people believe whales are a necessity.
Shigeru Tanafuji.
If this seems unbelievable, then we invite foreigners onto our ships to observe what we are doing. This way, we expect people to understand us.
For Mark Vautier, it was privileged access into a foreign world of ritual brutality and gentle ceremony. High in the crow's nest, the bosun controls the chase. The hunters and the hunted. It's as primal, as bloodlusty as it's always been. Inside the animal, the harpoon's barbs claw open, gaffing its innards. And the pain? That can only be speculated on. What we do know is that it is cruelly inefficient. Less than half the whales hit die this way. The rest meet with an additional but quite different form of torture.
They produced these wires that looked like something out of a Victorian horror book or horror story. They were actually going to electrocute a live animal with this hideous contraption, which they did, and they did it in front of my eyes. And of course I couldn't believe it.
You knew it was coming, but...
No, I didn't, because it wasn't in the literature.
The fact is, the Japanese have never disclosed full details of this, what's termed as their secondary killing method.
I suddenly realized that I was probably the only person outside the Japanese whaling industry who actually knew what was going on.
This is how it works. First the harpoon, then electric lances are stabbed into the whale. They avoid the head. That's required for experiments. The lances are wired to a generator, just 220 volts pulsed down, but as you'll hear later, only part of it is likely to reach the brain. The rest is either insulated by blubber or conducted away by the sea. Mark Vautier witnessed this procedure lasting anything up to 30 minutes.
I don't believe that a normal human being could sit and watch this and not think that it was wrong from any culture.
You've seen the footage, heard the eyewitness account. It's difficult, isn't it, to react with anything other than revulsion. So what's the Japanese position on this? Well, that's pretty unambiguous. They bluntly maintain to the International Whaling Commission that the way they kill whales is not inhumane, and they back that up with their own research. But scientists here have recently found quite differently.
One would have to say that during the electrocution, the animals must be in absolute agony.
Per Mardi, veterinary lecturer at Massey University.
And in this case, in particular, you have to compare with other animals or even with humans. And it's known from bungled electrocutions in the electric chair by asking the victim that it's an absolutely excruciating pain that's inflicted by electricity.
At Massey, scientists sought to replicate Japanese electrocution methods, but with a difference. Here they were in ideal controlled laboratory conditions using dead whales. They matched current and voltage, it's the same as your household mains, similar positioning of the electrodes, and with no chance here of electrical leakage into the seawater.
So take it up, 0 volts.
For the job to be done properly at sea, thousands, not hundreds of volts would be necessary, but that would be too risky.
If the Japanese were to use a suitable current density in the whale to achieve their results that they would prefer to achieve, I presume, then that would place the lives of the sailors at risk.
And then this matter of...
Dr. Jeff Barnes, a physicist. His job was to find out whether or not Japanese-style electrocution was effective. Could it reliably stun the whale's brain and stop its heart from beating? And what was your conclusion?
Well, we would conclude that there's no way that the whale is going to be stunned by the electric lance, and that the stopping of the heart cannot be done in a reliable fashion.
So if it can't be stunned, it's therefore conscious during the electrocution?
It'll be conscious during the agony of the electrocution.
And therefore?
And therefore we would conclude that the procedure is inhumane and should not really be carried out.
The Japanese claim there's been a campaign of misinformation about the electric lance, that on average it takes 44 seconds for a whale to die that way. They say no other method of secondary killing is as effective. Is it possible that, having been through electrocution, that the whale is still not dead?
That would be very likely. More likely they would drown as they are attached to the catcher boat. When the catcher boat moves, water is forced into their mouth and they would drown, or into the blowhole. It's absolutely inhumane, completely and totally inhumane. Only instant death can be humane.
The trade-off for a practice condemned for its inhumanity is for the Japanese science. You may be wondering why they don't kill the animal instantly with, say, a shot to the head. Well, Japanese science demands that the head be returned undamaged, because that's where the most important samples are found, the brain and a plug of earwax. Like rings on a tree, a new layer of wax binds to it each year. The plug therefore determines the creature's age and bolsters proof, the Japanese say, that the minke population can sustain hunting. Why do scientists from the wider scientific community greet the notion that Japanese whaling is scientific with such skepticism?
Well, I think the Japanese and other countries do use the scientific whaling as a cover for a small-scale commercial catch. And there's really not much question about that.
Dr. Scott Baker, Senior Lecturer, Biological Sciences, Auckland University.
If you attempt to justify your commercial catch by science, that's where many people in the conservation community and the scientific community are skeptical.
Skeptical because there are other methods, more sophisticated methods like DNA analysis for gathering the same information and more, and without having to kill the animals, let alone kill them Japanese style. And in the name of science, the kill goes on. Clinical in its efficiency, there is no wastage. Every part of the whale is dissected, sorted, and processed. And this is the lucrative spin-off from all that research. On Nishin Maru's production line, hundreds of thousands of kilograms of meat and blubber worth more than $100 million. Most of it destined for Japanese restaurant tables.
Having a small-scale scientific catch that's sold commercially, but not well regulated domestically, I think creates that cover for illegal whaling on far rarer and more endangered species.
Have you found any evidence to support that claim?
Oh yes, quite a lot of...
Dr. Baker went undercover to find that evidence. The results made Time magazine. He had clandestinely analysed whale meat samples bought in the markets of Japan. He proved that species which should not be hunted for any reason, let alone science, were readily available. The killing season over, Nishin Maru makes for warmer waters.
They were good people, good, hard-working, decent, honest people who had a job to do. They weren't, frankly, concerned with arguing the toss about resources or resource management.
The whaling ship left port more than 5 months ago. Now she's home at last. Pride on the faces of the crew for a job well done. These pictures are Marc Vautier's final record of that voyage. It's a deeply unsettling moment.
Inside, of course, I had this secret. I couldn't discuss what I was feeling with anybody.
That secret, of course, was his graphic record of the electrocutions. It was a moral dilemma. Should he expose what he had witnessed and break the censorship agreement with the Japanese? It was either that or
being complicit in an extremely ugly secret that I wanted no part of. Obviously, I couldn't live with the latter, which is why I chose to expose the electrocutions.
Only once in a decade is a car created that's this good. Completely redesigned. All new from the ground up, giving you the edge. The edge in style, in comfort, and on the open road. With handling and control like never before. The radically new Holden Commodore gives you the driving edge.
Welcome back to 60 Minutes. Last week, Mike Valentine reported on the death of Jim Stephen, an alcoholic who spent his last months living in squalor.
The once refined gentleman defecated in his chair. The stench of that, of urine, of rotting food, enveloped the place.
An Ultra Honga viewer wrote, "As a district nurse, I can validate that there are many Jims in our communities, and the blame rests not only with the caregiver, it also rests with many of us who let dreadful situations continue. The doctors who can use their powers under the Health Act to place people in care and don't. The nurses who do not push hard enough to make that happen. The families who don't want to make the hard decisions and leave it to the health professionals and then blame them when tragedy occurs. And finally, all of us who continue to let that neglected person make their own decisions, even when we know they should no longer be doing so." And this from the Auckland office of Age Concern. Unfortunately, we were not aware of Mr. Stephen's plight until quite late, so the advice we were able to give was more ambulance at the bottom of the cliff. People should be aware that Age Concern offers a number of elder abuse and neglect services throughout New Zealand. Thanks for those comments. Before we go tonight, a development in Cameron Bennett's story of a fortnight ago on young tennis star Rewa Hudson. Since our broadcast, Rewa and doubles partner Leanne Baker have won the Junior Open in Hong Kong and the World Super Junior Championships in Osaka. It's the first time a New Zealand girls doubles pair have won at this level. Also another development, this time in Janet McIntyre's report on former naval rating Larissa Turner. When 60 Minutes first revealed Larissa's allegations of sexual harassment back in March, the Navy launched an inquiry. This week it was announced 11 naval staff would face disciplinary charges. Well, that's our programme for tonight. We'll be back here on TV1 again next Sunday at 7:30. Until then, good night.
Society really has to be more responsible.
Was proudly brought to you by the radically new Holden Commodore, giving you the driving edge.